Wasn't that powerful? Well, thank you for our worship team leading us in song. That was, it's wonderful to be in the presence of God, isn't it? And we have a privilege and an honour to be here with God today. And so thank you for leading us into His presence. Now, Virgin Galactic can offer you some flights that will take you out into space. Now, I don't believe they offer business class or economy class. It's just one flat fare. But for $450,000, they can take you up, and the flight lasts 90 minutes. So if you've got a cool 450 grand to just go poof, you can do that. Breathtaking, isn't it? When you look at that planet, doesn't it look nice? God's made that planet. God's a wonderful creator, isn't He? That planet's the right size for us. But Bette Midler, when she sung that song, God is watching, but from a distance, is perhaps how many feel. And because when you see this sort of stuff in Lismore, and I just want you to just walk in their shoes just for a few minutes, just as you sort of think about what would it be like to be a part of the worst flood. They got about 700 mil in about 30 hours, plus a whole lot of other torrential rain. The river was above that bridge, and just all that rubbish just streaming down there. Lismore's only a town of about 30,000, but the power of moving water, what man builds, is unable to stand in the way. And when you lose everything, wondering if you're going to live, sitting on top of your roof, when perhaps a couple of days before you're watching Days of Our Lives or Neighbours, on your TV, and now you've got an umbrella. Oh well. And you're sitting on the roof waiting to be rescued with tinnies pulling up, taking you out. Lismore sits on a floodplain, and only, these houses are on the low-lying area of that floodplain, which sits 10 metres above sea level. Half the other town lives about 130 metres up, so they're okay. But since 1879, they've had 29 floods. So they get about one every 5 years. So they had one in 2017, which was a record breaker. They had two big ones in 54 and also in 1974. And that's when they finally thought, maybe we better do some flood mitigation. And so they did flood mitigation, but only for the ordinary floods, but not for the big ones. They felt that, the complexity of the whole area is such that, flood mitigations are just exceptionally difficult and just way over the top for such a small town. But the mitigation that they have done allows them enough time to evacuate for people, but it just didn't do much. But you got families that just lose everything. These are roof, and as you do. Bronwyn, they feel at home with a snake. Yeah, there you go. You can have that as your pet in your backyard along with your snakes. So, drive-through was closed that day. You need a submarine for your cheeseburger. But mate, that is high, isn't it? Where's the water? And, being plucked away to safety water over road. Thank you. You just, I wouldn't have known that. Now the clean-up. You know, with the clean-up, they say a year's supply of rubbish to dump, but I think it's a lot more than that. Just the clean-up. How do you rebuild? Where would your faith in God be in moments like these? What would you want to say to God at moments like these?
Thank you for saving my life.
Thank you for saving my life. Good. We'll come to some other questions that a prophet wrote that he had in a moment. But then, of course, this one erupted earlier this month in Ukraine, been bubbling up there for a while. And, you know, you got Russia who basically is a superpower, just wanted to take over Ukraine. Why? Because I can. And because he wants to resurrect the old USSR and be the next Tsar. I'm not sure of his motivations. He makes up a whole lot of stuff as he goes along, but I suspect it's because he wants to resurrect the old USSR back before 89, when Gorbachev allowed the USSR to disintegrate into a Commonwealth of independent states. And so he wants to take Ukraine back, and look at the devastation that happens in places like that. You know, your whole life just gets thrown into chaos. You know, with indiscriminate bombing of civilians, there are snipers who are hanging out in other buildings who are shooting civilians, shooting mums and dads with children in their arms, shooting them dead. You know, there's a UN convention on a civilised war. Oxymoron, I get that. But all of that's been thrown out the window. How can you, in all good conscience, look down a rifle and shoot women and children, men and families? Why? Just dreadful. Children's hospital, Children's and Women's Hospital, bombed. Why? Devastating, isn't it? These people here, you know, you lost everything. You know, your sense of life's turned upside down. You don't know if you're going to live. Food and water is now all but is disappearing as the Russians are surrounding and choking Kiev. You know, Ukraine's a country of 44 million people, and their country has been overrun by people like that. Dreadful, isn't it? Just dreadful. And, you know, these are people's homes. People's homes. Just gone. Bringing back memories of World War II, as well as some of the ominous signs of what happened to the lead up to World War II, and I'm talking about appeasement there. And, you know, you are struggling with the questions of, where is God in all this? Where is God? How does God view that sort of thing? Is God just sitting over here watching? Are you grateful that you're here in Tasmania? Oh, yeah, I am too. But how would Mark react if my life was turned upside down in Ukraine or Lismore? What would I want to ask God? And there was a prophet in the Old Testament who wanted to ask God some very penetrating questions. And we're going to have a look at Habakkuk. Habakkuk is one of those minor prophets after Daniel, and we'll give you about 5 or 10 minutes to find it, Takes anyway, I won't list all the... There's about the 8th minor prophet through the whole thing anyway, 2/3 the way through. And so we're going to read a fair bit of Habakkuk to just sort of give a little bit of a flavour of fair income. Oh, I wonder my glasses. I put it in here so it wouldn't get tangled. Anyway, 21st century problem. All right. Okay, we're going to read a fair bit of Habakkuk, just sort of get a bit of a flavour of what he's asking God. And I just, again, want you to walk through his shoes here. Now, Habakkuk, as I say, as a prophet, he's having a dialogue with God. He's not giving so much a message to Israel, but he's having a dialogue with God, asking him some questions. And he wrote it around about in the early 600s, bit after or a bit before 605, whichever way you look at it, before the Babylonians were to come in and overrun Israel. So that was around about the time that he wrote it. And so this is what he has to say. The oracle which Habakkuk the prophet saw. How long, O Lord, will I call for help, and you will not hear? I cry out to you, violence, and you do not save. Why do you make me see iniquity and cause me to look on wickedness? Yes, destruction and violence are before me. Strife exists, contention arises, therefore the law is ignored, and justice is never upheld, and the wicked surround the righteous, therefore justice comes out perverted. Now, what was Israel's society like during that time for Habakkuk to complain in this way? Well, we'll just read a couple of verses from Jeremiah chapter 7 and verse 9. All right, Jeremiah 7 verse 9, and he says here, behold, you are trusting in deceptive words to no avail. Will you steal, murder, commit adultery, swear falsely, and offer sacrifices to Baal and walk after other gods that you have not known, and then come and stand before me in this house, which is called by my name, say, we are delivered, that you may do all these abominations. So, just come over to verse 30. For the sons of Judah have done that which is evil in my sight, declares the Lord. They have set their detestable things in the house which is called by my name to defile it. They have built high places, the Topheth, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to burn their sons and their daughters in the fire, which I did not command, and it did not come into my mind. So when we go back to Habakkuk, let's just go back. Hope you left your thumb in it. All right, let's just go back to Habakkuk. So when he says to you, and you, how long, O Lord, will I call for help, and you do not hear? What was he seeing? He was seeing terrible things that were happening. He was seeing lying, stealing, adultery. What else? Sacrifice of children. Now, there's a commentator by the name of John Ronald Blue, and he says, planet Earth may look marvellous from a satellite, but those who live on the dusty globe tend to look rather grim. Increased turmoil, rising terrorism, mounting tragedies, unprecedented trauma, increasing pollution, deepening trials. Feeling depressed yet? And unparalleled tensions cast a dark shadow over earthlings. The world looks more and more like ominous black sphere with a short fuse, a time bomb sizzling to explode. It is little wonder thinking people begin to ask question, why is there so much oppression? Why all the injustice? Why do all men prosper? Why do the righteous suffer? Why doesn't God do something? Why doesn't God clean up this mess? Why? Habakkuk asking the same question. Why? You know, in the temple courtyard and in the temple itself, there was the idol and the pole of Ashereth that was erected there, and there were child sacrifices that were done in the valley of Hinnom, which is just outside the temple. And this is the valley here of where they would do it, and you would see it in a stone's throw from the temple. Now, just process that for a minute. The nation of Israel, worshipping Baal, didn't observe the law, sacrificing children, and this is what Habakkuk was saying. How long will I call for help and you will not hear? I cry out to you violence and you do not save. Why do you make me see iniquity and cause me to look on wickedness? Yes, destruction and violence are before me. Strife exists and contention arises. Therefore the law is ignored and justice is never upheld. For the wicked surround the righteous. Therefore justice is perverted and just goes out the window. Poor Habakkuk is asking God, why? But this is not just why. You know, you may not have experienced this, but husband, wife, starts going, you did this. You should have done that. You. Maybe I'm only the only one who's ever done it. But this is Habakkuk going, you, waving his finger. And if you ever done any sort of relationship sort of stuff, there's one thing you never do. You. Why? Blame game. So Habakkuk is saying, you. Why haven't you done anything? Well, guess what in this dialogue? Habakkuk levels all this against God. And guess what? He answers. Are you surprised? Now, what does he answer with? Now, don't you want to know an answer to this of why? I'll tell you, it's a ripper. All right, let's have a look. Verse 5. Well, God says, look among the nations, observe, be astonished, wonder, because I am doing something in your days. You will not believe if you were told, I am raising up the Babylonians. Oh, hang on. Something wrong here. For behold, I am raising up the Chaldeans, that fierce, impetuous people who march throughout the earth to seize the dwelling places which are not theirs. They are dreaded and feared. Their justice and authority originate with themselves. In other words, they're lawless. Their horses are swifter than leopards. They're keener than wolves in the evening, and their horsemen come galloping, and etc., etc. Invading of the Babylonians. So God, let's get this straight. We get that we are not quite as righteous as what we should be, and that our righteous robes are perhaps a little bit soiled. But the raising up of the Babylonians to overrun your nation, your people, could you imagine Habakkuk scratching his head? What are you doing? Well, Habakkuk did scratch his head, and he comes with his second complaint. Are you not from everlasting, O Lord? He has a slightly different tone now. He's sort of calmed down a little bit. Are you not from the everlasting, O Lord my God, my Holy One? We will not die. You, O Lord, have appointed them to judge, and you, O Rock, have established them to correct. Your eyes are too pure to approve evil. So, in other words, in verse 3, why do you tolerate treachery? And you cannot look on wickedness with favour. Why do you look with favour on those who deal treacherously? Why are you silent when the wicked swallow up those more righteous than they? Why have you made them like fish of the sea, like creeping things without a ruler over them? The Chaldeans bring all these up with a hook, drag them away with their net, and gather them together in their fishing net. Therefore they rejoice and are glad. What does he mean by that, dragging up the fish? Well, how much regard does a fisherman have for the fish in the sea as he's... I don't know too many, they have no regard for it whatsoever. And that's the regard for the people. The Chaldeans, the Babylonians were a cruel, cruel people. They had no regard for human life. And therefore, they offer sacrifices to their net and burn incense to their fishing net, because through these things their catch is large. So in other words here, they are a people of idolatry. So Habakkuk says, why do you use people of treachery? Why do you use a people of injustice? And why do you use people of idolatry? The Chaldeans worship their own strength. Are you left scratching your head? Poor Habakkuk, here's your holy nation that you brought out, that you made a covenant with. But he gives a little hint here. Look at the world around you. He wants to expand your eyes. So when it comes to the question of why, expand our vision. Don't look at what's happening here, because there's that. But there's more to come. Now, I said to you, this is a dialogue. So this was a second complaint. So he's asking, God, why do you use a people of injustice who are evil? Are you not righteous? How could you use people like that? Idolatrous, such a cruel people against your own. Baffling, isn't it? But he comes here, verse 1, I'll stand on my guard post, Habakkuk says, and station myself on the rampart, and I will keep watch to see what he will speak to me and how I may reply when I am reproved. All right, so standing on the watchtower, this is not so much a physical watchtower. This is talking about the attitude of Habakkuk waiting for a reply. Come on. Give it to me. I'm listening. Now God comes back at him again. But he comes with something even more startling. He says, then the Lord answered me and said, record the vision and inscribe it on tablets. In other words, he wants to be clear on this, and he wants the people to hear. Verse 3, for the vision is yet for the appointed time, talking about the Chaldeans. It hastens towards the goal, and it will not fail. Though it tarries and wait for it will certainly come. Well, that's not great news, is it? That is not great news. He's just reinforced what he's already said. Behold, as for the proud one, his soul is not right within him, but the righteous will live by faith. The righteous will live by faith. You're going to be really disappointed at this moment because God doesn't answer why he is using the Babylonians or the Chaldeans. But he tells Habakkuk, who's sitting on the watchtower and the rampart, waiting for the reply, and he says to him, the just shall live by faith. God's people will live by faith. What does that mean? Romans 1:17 is the other place where it's used, along with Hebrews 10:38 and Galatians 3:11. So it's used in the New Testament a few times. Now, as good Adventists, we will talk about the just shall live by faith as a declaration by God that you are righteous, the just shall live by faith, you are forgiven. That's true. But the verb here is to live. Is to live. How are you, he's saying to Habakkuk, going to dispense justice? How are you going to live by faith, to live righteously, and to dispense justice? Now, when I was younger as a Adventist, I would sit in my armchair, throwing little jaffers. Why doesn't God do these things? Clean this up, clean that up, make things right. God says to Habakkuk, I am doing something. I am doing something. It wasn't what Habakkuk said, what wanted to hear, but I am doing something. It's easy for Mark to say, why don't you sort out Putin? God would say to me, Mark, I am doing something. I have done something. I've got my hands dirty in this world. I've come to this world. I have seen, experienced the evil in this world firsthand. I was put on a cross. I was whipped, crown of thorns, rod and staff. People spat on me, whipped me, tore skin of flesh off me. I did this because I love you. I love this world. I want to redeem it. I am doing something about it. Now he's saying to Habakkuk, what are you doing about it? Habakkuk's got to wrestle with that now. So when people want to have a look, wanting to try and make things right in this world, there's one thing that you can't do. And there was a protest in Sydney that wanted to flood-proof and fireproof Australia. Is that feasible? And they blamed the Prime Minister. Wanting to fireproof Australia, they've had protests in England as well. People will blame the Prime Minister that if they didn't destroy the Eraring power station, floods wouldn't happen. And the Eraring power station is just south of Newcastle. What does Matthew 24 say? Oh, sorry. What does Matthew 24 say? There's going to be floods, earthquakes, war, famine. What's the other one? Pestilence. Have we experienced that?
Yes.
Absolutely. Can a Prime Minister dial back the weather? Oh, please. You know, we sometimes our solutions are so puerile. But for Adventists who are living in 2022, same question then arose back in the 600s BC to Habakkuk, who was living through terrible times where he would see justice that was perverted. He would see child sacrifices, the most hideous of all worship practices. He would see murder, and he wouldn't see any sort of justice. And says to God, why aren't you doing something about it? I am raising up the Chaldeans. Who are even worse? He's struggling with that, but the challenge to Habakkuk is the just shall live by faith. When we see war, floods, same question is said to us. The just shall live by faith. Now, remember I was saying to you about sitting in the armchair throwing jaffas? You know what frightens me? If I was to actually ask God that question, and I've done that a few times, why don't you do something about this? Where are you? And if I was to actually go to God and actually ask him that question, you know what I'll be afraid of? That I would be afraid of the answer. And the answer would be, Mark, what are you doing? The just shall live, actually live it out by faith. We have good tenets of our faith, the 28 fundamentals. But in our world, we have to dispense what that actually means in day-to-day life. So for Mark, to live justly before God means to deal justly with out there and in my world, and to live through trusting God, knowing that he is there, knowing that he is active, and seeing the bigger picture, and to live by faith, and also be conscious of my neighbour. So if we were to come before God, what would he say to you? And what would we do? What is our response?